Welcome all to Reimagining Success, Cultivating Fulfillment in Our Lives and Livelihoods. So happy to be with you all. I want to start with a quote. We are attentive to what we measure. We are attentive to what we measure. This is a quote from Dr. Havin To, a mentor of mine, a Dharma teacher, and also the former program director of the Gross National Happiness Center in Bhutan. And I thought it a fitting quote for beginning our time together because today is all about what is success? What is true success? What do we want to unlearn about success? And what are the metrics that we're using? So we are attentive to what we measure, inviting us to reflect on that as we begin. I'm Della Duncan. I'm going to host this conversation with Maureen. So grateful, Maureen, you can join us. I am the co-designer and co-facilitator of Gaia Education's Cultivating Regenerative Livelihoods course that's starting here in the spring. The next one will run from January through April of 2025. My co-designer and co-facilitator, Sylvia de Blasio, is here. Welcome, Sylvia. And Sylvia is going to put the link in the chat for the course and a discount code for everyone attending this webinar in case you'd like to join us. So thank you to Sylvia for joining. Thank you to Gaia Education for hosting this event. We have Jan, part of the Gaia Education team. Thank you, Jan. And really thank you all to all of you for coming, for joining, for being with as we explore this delicious topic of reimagining success. And finally, a really large thank you to Maureen, my dear friend and Dharma sister. Maureen is a clinical social worker, a mindfulness-based psychotherapist, and a meditation teacher based in Durango, Colorado. And I've actually gotten to visit Maureen and stay with her and be with her Sangha there, which was such a delight. And importantly for today, Maureen has also recently come out with this book, Reimagining Success, Manifesting Happiness and Fulfillment. And it's this book that I got to listen to. It's actually her reading it, and I listened to it and felt inspired to share it with us and bring it into a workshop in interactive form. So Maureen, deep gratitude for you joining us today. Thank you. And again, Sylvia will put the link for Maureen's website and also that book in the chat. So today what we're going to be doing is starting with a bell and then have a conversation with Maureen with a few guided practices. As Maureen is a meditation teacher, we'll have some experiential practices. You may want a pen and paper for some of this. There might be some reflection, particularly around the domains of success. And then we'll have plenty of time for a Q&A. So if there's any insights or reflections or questions that arise as you're listening, feel free to put them in the chat or jot them down, and we're going to come to them because we're really, really excited to bring this topic to life in our own daily lives and livelihoods. And we are recording this this conversation, and so it will be shared. So we do have that. You can listen back. And then finally, this conversation is offered in the spirit of the gift economy. So we are offering it freely for its benefit to all of us and rippling out into the web of life. And if anyone would like to give a gift back to Maureen, Gaia Education, and myself, we'll put the link in the chat. It's simply to re-register and donate through the registration link. So thank you for those donations to help support this work. So let's begin with a bell, helping us settle and arrive into our conversation today on reimagining success, fulfillment in our lives and livelihood. So wherever you are in the world, whatever day you've had thus far, I just want to invite the bell to help us settle and arrive into this topic. So I'll ring it once. We'll take a few moments. You can have your eyes open or closed, whatever feels good for you. And then I'll ring the bell again, and we'll dive into the conversation. Thank you all. So let us begin with introductions. I always love when folks get to introduce themselves because sometimes we say things that are, more relational in that way. And so, Maureen, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, and particularly in relation to the topic. This topic of reimagining success. What's your personal connection? Why is that topic so alive for you?
Thanks. Thank you, Della. That's awesome. So, for me, as Della pointed out, I've been a mindfulness-based psychotherapist for 30 years and also a meditation teacher. I served on the Dharma Council of the Durango Dharma Center for 8 years. And together with my husband, who's a psychiatrist, we've created True Success for All, this program that is really aiming to help people live a more successful life. Where we came from that was originally starting years ago as therapists, trying to help people live better lives. If I use the metaphor of people falling in the river, we were jumping in the river, helping pull people out of the river. And after a while, you start to realize, there's too many people coming down, there's too much suffering. And you get curious about what's the causes of this suffering. And so we started looking at how can we actually help people live more successfully or successfully pull themselves out of the river when conditions have been such that they've fallen in. And this happened to do with people at work, in their relationships, also their meditation practices. As a meditation teacher, I had lots of people say, I'm a terrible meditator. I can't get my practice off the ground. So in many, many ways, people were struggling with whether or not they were living a successful life or feeling fulfilled by their life. And some of it had to do with trauma and very big problems, and some of it had to do with not understanding the matrix of how to create a successful life. And so my husband Mark and I started working on how can we empower people to be able to pull themselves out of the river when it's been tough, and then empower themselves to actually go forward and create a successful life.
Thank you. And you know that I also love that upstream metaphor. It's a really great one. And I too have been on a journey. And so to share my own relation with reimagining success, it's a little different. I have also gone upstream to figure out what is causing the suffering of our time. And I invite everyone who's here to take that journey, whatever issue or crisis or situation that you care deeply about that's breaking your heart. What is it you find when you go upstream? And for me, one of the main things that I found is in relation to our economic system, right? How
Mhm.
our economy is valuing certain labor and not others, how it is commodifying nature, how it is connecting or disconnecting ourselves from our bodies, from each other, and from the web of life. And really the operating principles and underlying assumptions around mainstream economic thinking and around the dominant ideologies and worldviews of, we can call it capitalism or the growth industrial society. And as part of that, one of the things within that is looking at how is progress, development, success measured, right? And so on the individual level, it can often be financial wealth or gain. On the business level, it's the growth of profit. And then on the societal level, it's growth of gross domestic product. And we know that those measurements are so focused and not holistic, and they don't actually measure this more holistic sense of what's really important to us, the health and well-being of ourselves, our communities, and the more than human world. And so one connection I have with today is reimagining our own metrics on the individual level, but thinking about that on all the levels, right? And right now is so exciting because there's communities around the world who are doing this. We are attentive to what we measure and how can we change what we measure. So just to name a few, donut economics is one of them. What if the goal of an economy was not blind growth, but instead meeting of human needs within relation to the needs of the planet? We have gross national happiness, which I mentioned, which is a holistic sense of happiness for people on the planet. There's the Whales Wellbeing for Future Generations Act. There's Buen Vivir in Latin and South America. So there's so many of these. So yeah, thank you today for bringing in this to the personal level and how we can bring this kind of post-growth, post-capitalist alternative metrics and indicators into our
Mhm.
own lives. So I just want to share that connection. Let's dive into what is unhelpful about success and how it's defined in the mainstream. And maybe folks can be thinking about, what have you been taught about what success is, right? And where have you been taught that, right?
Mhm.
What is a good life? What is a good day? What is success? What is progress, right? What are the things that we're taught, maybe in terms of mainstream economics, but even more generally? So, what have you found? What have you written about? And what is it we need to unlearn?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Well, the first thing is that when it comes to success, we're often taught that it has to do with money, fame, winning, and power and status, right? And people start striving for that. I have to get that in order. I have to keep up with the Joneses. I have to be able to show that I have a nice car, those kinds of things, or the right job, or the right, you know, a house, or those kinds of material things. The problem with that is that those markers all are outside definitions of success. They don't come from our internal definition of what feels successful. And so, one of the things we look at is the idea of success being a meaningful and fulfilling life. And so, having money, fame, status, power, that may not add up to a meaningful and fulfilling life. And if we look at why we believe these things or where we get them from, we're conditioned to believe this, right? So, for instance, in our education, I'll just speak to the United States for a moment. In the American education system, which was developed, after World War II for a lot, what came out of that was the education was being pushed towards what works in the corporate world. So basically, what makes a good employee, right? Can you sit at a desk? Do you know enough math, enough writing to be able to be a good employee? So that's one way. That's not really pointing to the individual's needs, it's pointing to the corporate need. In another example, consumerism or capitalism. We're conditioned to become consumers, right? So a lot of things are how much you buy, how much did you spend, those kinds of markers. And so I'll give you an example that I'm seeing a lot right now in the holiday season. There's a lot of commercials or people I'm talking to who actually have equated love with how much they spend on their Christmas gift or how lavish their party is. So if I love you, I have to spend a lot of money to show that I love you, right? And so it's this kind of conditioning that we've gotten. Another one is conditioning like who's right and who's wrong, or us versus them. It's not conditioning towards building community or including community, and that makes us richer. And so when you have these kinds of matrices going on, people get really confused about what actually makes success, what is success. But importantly, it causes a lot of anxiety for people. So people have anxiety about, am I good enough? Marketing plays into that sometimes, like, oh, you're getting older, so you need cream because you have wrinkles, something like that. So it's, am I good enough? Do I look right? Do I fit in? Those kinds of anxieties. And also things like not being able to listen to each other when I'm in competition. I'm actually competing against my neighbor, or I'm, comparing myself against my neighbor. And those cause anxiety and stress in communities. Communities start to break down in those moments. So it keeps us from hearing each other, but that anxiety also keeps us from hearing our own heart, our own calling, that which is saying, hey, this is what you need to feel like you would have lived a meaningful and fulfilling life. No one gets to the end of their life and says, I wish I bought more cars. That's not what people say on their deathbeds. I do have people who say, I wish I had shown up in my relationships better. I wish I had been more attentive to the people I love. I wish I had spent more time out in nature, things like that. So, so this is what we need to unlearn, is this kind of these matrices that are outside conditioning instead of inside conditioning, what we like to call our inner compass. And the other piece is resolving this anxiety so that we can actually start to hear ourselves. So we want to resolve this anxiety, let go of our fears, let go of our not good enoughness. This is what we're unlearning, and then come back inside in touch with this deeper part of ourselves that allows us to hear what's really calling to us. In the Indian culture, there's a beautiful concept called chanda, and it means that fire inside you that just won't leave you alone, that thing that keeps calling, right? And we can't hear that if we've got a lot of anxiety, a lot of yeah buts, a lot of what ifs, comparative mind. So to me, that's a big piece of what we have to unlearn. And if we can do this in our personal life, then it starts to show up in our work. It shows up in the kind of work we do, and it starts to show up in our communities and our systems. I love that you talked about systems. You and I have had lots of conversations about systems and individuals. And for true success for all, in our mind, when you have healthy, stable, centered individuals, then you have healthy, stable, centered systems, right? You can't have a healthy system if the individuals are anxious, fearful, doubtful, competitive, those kinds of things. So, yeah, I hope that feels like an answer there.
Absolutely. No, there's so much for us to unlearn. And yeah, I do appreciate that we're bringing in both the personal and the systemic. And you're reminding me of the Kahneman curve. So Daniel Kahneman, he offers a curve that shows that happiness and income are correlated until a certain amount and then it plateaus. And I just want to share that because we're not just saying it's all an individual, like one can kind of think away or, um, work with scarcity that is actually materially real. That money and happiness, more money does equal more happiness if somebody really doesn't have enough to sustain themselves. And then there is a plateau, meaning there is a point of enoughness. And I find that point of enoughness so helpful. And it's at that point that more money does not necessarily equal more happiness, and things like meaning or, purpose can really come about. So we do need that systemic change as well as that personal. And what Kate Raworth, the founder of Donna Economics, would say is, let us be growth agnostic. And I think I'm hearing that in what you're saying, where money and, kind of advancement financially and all that can be a means to an end, but not an end in itself. Right. And so, again, on the societal level, if the goal is meeting human needs while staying within the needs of the planet, then perhaps some growth is needed in some places and degrowth is needed elsewhere. And same for us. There may be times when more money in our livelihood garden, right, producing a plant that is maybe more stable or having some way that we make a little bit more money can actually be really supportive for our sense of holistic wellness, but that it's not an end goal in itself, that we're looking at success more holistically. I also wanted to share one thing that I'm unlearning around success. I had this sense. I mean, I've really gotten into the conveyor belt of productivity. I've really, really, it's really ingrained in me that my worth is how much I get done, and I have to be hyper productive. And it's led to a lot of multitasking and just a real difficulty sitting still, relaxing, zoning out. Like I really struggle with this. So I'm trying to unlearn that. And one thing that was helpful, a friend of mine, Jalen Gordon, she said, what if it wasn't at the end of the day, how much of my to-do list did I get done? Or did I get my to-do list done? But instead, did my to-do list match my energy and capacity available for that day? Like, was I gentle with myself and was I realistic? I don't know. I find that very self-compassionate. And I've also been embracing monotasking, right? Simply giving, the meal that I'm making or the conversation really full attention, right? So that's another unlearning. And I'm curious if others have ways that they are unlearning what true success is and what we've been told. And now I want to go into your definition of true success, because you and your husband and in your work you've been really reflecting on this and asking people this. So before I do, I just want to ask everyone who's on this webinar, on this call, like, true success is dot dot dot, and see what you would come up with. True success is, and feel free to put it in the chat. Feel free to just reflect on it. but even just the opportunity to ask this question of ourself, right? There can be unlearning and there can be some thinking. So true success is, maybe just a few folks want to populate in the chat. It's just beautiful to see what we might say. True success is, we have time and freedom, happiness and fulfillment, the amount of connection you have, the joy you feel, the peace you have, feeling that you are enough, feeling in love with everything I do, answering the call of the divine around what is yours to do, being at the heart of a beating, thriving community, following our heart and soul's longing, contentment, the lovely humans in your life, not being worried about shelter and food, fulfilled to energy to give, aligning my actions and environment to my values, channeling love in every moment. Somebody wrote, true success is not seeking success. Beautiful. Great. Excellent. So let me ask you, Maureen, and thank you all for bringing those in. How would you define true success?
Thanks. So those are beautiful. Those are beautiful. And one of the things that it points to is the enlivening that happens with it's not the what so much as what the what means, right? So it's expressing when you go out in nature or you're with your family, it's like, what does that give you, right? Getting clear about those matrices, those qualities that are there. So for us, true success, we have a little motto for it. We say that true success is expressing our true nature as best we can, right here in the present moment, and then helping others to do the same. And what that means is being a regular human as best you can, being clear with being authentic to yourself, compassionate to yourself, expressing your passions, and having healthy relationships. Another way to say it would be to have personal and social agency. Personal agency is the ability to make your life go in a desired direction, in a healthy desired direction. And social agency is the ability to work with groups of people, whether it's just your best friend or your family or large groups or at work, and be able to work with people effectively so that your dreams and visions actually have movement and they actually have collaboration. So that's our definition. We try to keep it simple and then help people. We can take apart that phrase and help people figure out, okay, how do I make that happen? How do I make my true nature arise as best I can in this moment and help others do the same?
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, again, thank you all for everyone putting theirs in the chat. I'm thinking it feels like a poem that we've written together. So thank you for those. So, in looking at true success, you have come up with domains. And I love this because I love being able to do check-ins and to do some like quick feedback loops, right? How am I doing in each domain? And again, donut economics has these domains, gross national happiness has these domains, but they're really on the systemic level, the societal or the economy level. And then you offer them for our individual level. And so I'd love to guide us through this. I'd love for you to guide us through this. So again, if you have a paper and pen or you want to grab one, we're going to get to hear the domains that Maureen has come up with to really holistically define true success. And I find this really helpful, particularly around the new year, because there might be some good intentions or inquiries or even next steps that come from this inquiry. So, Maureen, tell us about these domains that you offer for success and guide us through them.
Yeah, so let me tell you how we came up with them. So first of all, we had people coming in our office, for years as therapists saying, well, I'm a successful person, but I'm not happy. My life's a mess. And we started kind of piecemealing that. What does that mean that you're successful, but you're a hot mess? It was like, how does that go together? And what we found was that people were coming in saying, well, I'm really successful at work, but I struggle, maybe with my home life. Or I'm a really gifted artist. I do very well with that, but I suffer from depression when I'm not kind of doing art or on. And so we started piecemealing what are these places where people are doing great and then breaking down. And what we found was that humans have 7 basic building blocks. And the basic building blocks are psychological, your mental health, those kinds of things, your physical domain, which is your body and the expression physically of your life, emotional domain, your cognitive domain, how you think, how you process, how you organize things, your social domain, your social relational domain, and also your spiritual domain, how you perceive that which is beyond our everyday life, and the integrative domain, which is how it all goes together. And if it's well integrated, it functions well. If it's not well integrated, it doesn't work very well. And so what we found was that people often, almost across the board, kind of came up with the same pattern. They were great in 2 domains, like really gifted, doing well and thriving. They were okay or competent in 3 others. And they were really struggling in 2, like 2 bottom domains. And oftentimes that was the discrepancy of the story. So I'm great here, but I'm struggling here. And so we thought, okay, if we look at those bottom 2 domains, we started seeing that the bottom 2 domains were actually defining much of people's lives. So it didn't matter if you were a successful CEO. If you had a drug problem, that drug problem was going to win out. It didn't matter if you were a great surgeon. If you had a rage issue, it didn't matter. That rage issue was going to get you in trouble at the hospital, right? If you're raging at the staff. So it was these kinds of things that we were like, wow, these bottom 2 domains are actually pulling the whole thing down, so that people were saying, I don't feel like I have a successful life, even though I succeed in some areas. So we wanted to bring those bottom 2 at least up to competence. It wasn't like everything had to be perfect. It was like if those 2 could be competent, then at least it wouldn't drag everything down, and our success and our passions could pull us forward in our life. So we started mapping for people, what are their domains, where are they functioning at, and then helping people, which are the ones that are causing you difficulty and how can we bring those up. And even in the ones they're doing well in, is there any fine tuning that you wish to do? So I'll give you an example. You might be a brilliant athlete and really gifted in that physical domain, but you struggle with a lot of pressure to perform all the time. So could you still be gifted, but maybe let go of some of that pressure to perform, if that makes sense? So what I'd love to do is just walk you through a little reflection of your own domains right now. And so you can write these down, and we'll make it really simple. These are just generalizations. We know that you can kind of take apart every domain and go, well, I'm good at this, but not that. These are just overall generalizations. So why don't we say we'll do it on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being it's kind of in the toilet, I'm struggling, it's really not okay. And 10 being I'm amazing, it's great, I love this domain, I'm really thriving here. So the first domain is your physical domain. And this is the domain of your body. So it includes your health, your mobility, things like that, your movement, and the expression of your body. Like, for instance, do you love dancing or skiing, or, you love walking, things like that. And so just on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you say your physical life is at? And then moving on, you can look at your psychological domain. So your mental health. Do you have strong mental health? Are you generally okay? Do you suffer from depression or anxiety, panic attacks, a lot of doubt, those kinds of things? Or do you feel more stable? So again, your psychological domain, where would you place that? And then we look at emotional domain. How comfortable are you with your emotions? First of all, are you able to feel all your emotions? Or do you live in a small corner like, oh, I have to always be good, so I can never have any anger? Or I, have to be good, so I can never be silly and fluid, because that, would inhibit you. Do you have rage attacks? or lots of anxiety, depression? Like, are there things where you're expressing yourself emotionally in a way that's troublesome for other people? Or do you feel like emotionally you kind of have a hold on yourself and you're able to kind of navigate the world in a pretty, centered way overall, outside of like a major trauma or something like that? Yeah. If you do have emotional difficulties, are you able to pull yourself back into center, or do you just spin out for days? That would be another marker for you. Yeah. And then there's the cognitive domain. This is the domain of thinking and processing, organizing. So this includes, can you organize your day? Are you able to be on time for things? Or do you have attention difficulties like ADHD? Or do you have learning challenges or learning what might be called learning disabilities that get in the way of you organizing information? And this can come into receiving information, processing the information, or expressing the information. So some people say, well, I listen really well and I get the idea, but I just can't express what I know. So that might be a difficulty for you. So that's the cognitive domain. And then the social relational domain. How do you do in your relationships? And this might, be a split for some people. Some people might say, I'm really great at work and I'm funny and I'm whatever. But when I go home or it comes to intimacy, I struggle a lot. So there might be a split. Or you might find, I'm great at relationships kind of all around, or not great at relationships. They scare me. I'm overwhelmed by them. I avoid them at all cost. That would be the relational domain. And then the spiritual domain. And this includes your version of how you see the world beyond our everyday world. For some people, that involves God and divinity. For other people who are more agnostic or atheist, they may say, no, I don't believe in God. They might come from a more scientific, proof-oriented kind of orientation. And you can be an atheist and agnostic and still have a rich spiritual life. It's how do you understand that which is beyond this world? How do you relate to it? Is it something that you find comfort in, or that you talk to? You talk to God, or you're in relationship with, or do you avoid it and it's painful for you and you don't want to have anything to do with it? So just checking in with your spiritual domain, because that really does affect our life on a pretty large scale of how we see the bigger meaning of our life. And then finally, the integrative domain. And this is how well do you integrate? How well does this, I like to call it Maureen Inc., Me Inc., right? How well does Me Inc. function? Or is it more like I'm only good at two things and everything else is just kind of discombobulated and a mess? Or does it kind of hum as a well-oiled machine? That would be your integration. And so again, just 1 to 10, how integrated you feel, how well you feel like you're functioning overall. So that just gives you a little snapshot of what might be impacting what you would look at if you're saying, I wish my life were more fulfilling. I wish it were moving a little more forward in a direction I want. This might give you some of the keys as to what's breaking down to stop you from going forward.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I really found it helpful personally, and I hope others did too. And just to say, if it moved a little quickly, we do have this recording, and it is a chapter per domain in each book, so we have that too. Um, so yeah, I just want to share another way if the 1 to 10 doesn't resonate. I found this model of like a gas tank and doing, am I like shading? Am I on low or empty? Am I
Mhm.
like, or no, am I empty? Am I low? Am I, half full? Is my tank half full? Am I, 3/4 full, or am I a full tank? I don't know. Somehow that like
Mhm.
visualization is also helpful. But I find this type of thing really useful. And when I said the feedback loop, what I meant by that is to do this check-in today, and then I'm going to ask you in a moment, like, what do I do with this? But to do it regularly, because then you can see what can I try? What can I prototype? What can I put attention towards, right? And then when do I want to check back so that I can see the progress and development in that sense? So how would you offer that we work with this now that we have these numbers? I know I have some numbers, I have some that I'm, doing well in, some that I'm, not doing as well in. What might we do with this information?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is take the ones where you're struggling and you wish they were in a different place and take some time to sit with them, like to really sit with them and explore why is this difficult? And chances are you're going to find some fears or some limiting beliefs about that domain, like, I hate math and I wasn't good at school. Like those kinds of global statements to yourself will really slow you down in that domain. And so I'm thinking of Carolyn Dweck's work at Stanford, and she talks about fixed mindsets, right? And how if we have a fixed mindset, like we have a fixed idea about a domain, it's really hard to change it if you believe, well, that's just how it is, right? And so we want to let go of that fixed part. And so by doing that, we explore like what are the ideas we have here, what are the stories or the narratives I'm carrying, and then to ask, where did I learn that? Where did I learn that? Oh, I gave up on school in fifth grade when that teacher was really mean to me, or I gave up on my physical body when, you know, I was terrible at sports. You might, or harm came. There may have been abuse or trauma. So you're just looking for the story. You don't have to go deeply into it, but at least that actually has something to do with this here. And then what we want to do is take some time, either ourselves if we can, or if it's like a trauma situation, you want to work with maybe with a therapist and do the work to release those fears, to let those fears unravel and go. They're old data. They're old data. One of the things people don't realize about how our brain develops is that 80% of the information we are working off of was formed before or by 10 years old. So if you think about it, how to climb a tree, how to tie your shoe, how to read, how to do, basic math, most of what we learned was as a child. And so our information about these domains is entwined with my 4-year-old, my 5-year-old part, all these, we call them mental formations. And usually the information is outdated, right? It's like if you're seeing this domain from the perspective of a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, you probably could update the information on it. So we want to let go of our fears. We want to update the information about the domain. We want to get in touch with a deeper sense of self where we can find some strength so that we then have the ability to cultivate the domain. It's not just that we release the fears. A lot of times people go, oh, I just released the fear. Why aren't I doing great? Why am I not doing great? And it's like, well, because it still needs to be cultivated. If you've been in fear for 20 years, you haven't cultivated that domain as well as the ones you're really great at. So I'll just give you an example. If you're, afraid of the water, don't want to swim, you could go and release your fears about, swimming. And that's beautiful, but that doesn't make you a great swimmer. You still have to go take some lessons, right? So there is some cultivation that has to happen, but hopefully by then, without the fear, without the old narratives, it starts to feel fun and there's potential and there's some fresh learning that actually makes you feel more alive because you're coming home to a part of yourself that you haven't dealt with for a long time. I like to tell people it's kind of like we have a castle and there are these different wings. Each domain is a wing in the castle. And some people say, I haven't been in that castle since 5. It's like, oh, well, it's a lovely wing, or that wing of the castle. It's a lovely wing if you can go in and clear out the cobwebs and the fear and do some healing and then open that up. It just makes you feel so much more alive when you're actually living through all your domains. That's what creates the health, the balance, the personal and social agency, you know, and helps us start to create the success we're looking for, the fulfillment we're looking for in our life. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I love that invitation to be fun and playful about it. So because I think about, I wouldn't want to say, okay, how can I fix this? Like this really
Right.
like fixing this mentality and really forcing. And instead, the word cultivating is so gentle, right? It's like
Mhm.
what we do with plants, right? So it's really gentle. And then we can try things. Like I love this idea of prototype. Like, okay, the spiritual domain, I'm really low. Like I'm going to try meditating and it's okay if it doesn't resonate, or join a choir, see if that works. It's like playful, experimental, gentle, right? And then do this check-in again, right? So I love all that. And then the other thing I might add too is that like appreciative inquiry, the part where we also celebrate the domains that we're feeling abundant in.
Oh, yeah.
Like I'm thinking of Strengths Quest. It was this test that indicate what you're good at. And I remember when you take this Strengths Quest test, they don't actually tell you what your lowest strengths are. They
Uh-huh.
refuse to tell you because the whole point is not to like perfect all the strengths. It's more to like celebrate the strengths that you do have. So I also find it useful to notice the domains that I'm doing well in and to celebrate that and to say that I feel comfortable in those wings of the castle is also a
Mhm.
beautiful thing. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing too, practicing that gratitude and
Yeah.
appreciation.
And I would just add one other piece too, is that as you start to watch yourself in the domains and look at it, what you'll find is that your really strong domains are often compensating or carrying some of the ones that are struggling. So for instance, I'll just give an example. You might be great at, oh, my husband and I have different strengths this way. And if we're going to hang a picture, I do it more visual spatially. I go, that feels right there. My husband's a person who takes out the tape measure and he measures from the ceiling. And so he loves to, measure to do that because that's how his cognitive strength works. And so sometimes you may not be great at math, let's say, but you have a great feel for how that picture should hang, right? And so you're like, oh, I get through life because of these stronger domains as well. They kind of carry me here and there, which is lovely to acknowledge that and appreciate and celebrate that for yourself. Is that you're doing okay in a lot of ways, which is like, let's celebrate that. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to move to what this might mean for our livelihoods because this title is, reimagining success, cultivating fulfillment in our lives and livelihoods. And we are having this conversation in anticipation of this course, Cultivating Regenerative Livelihoods. So, what might we take by way of insight or next steps after doing this assessment, this reflection on what true success means to us and how we're doing in these domains? What might this mean for our livelihood path?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, one of the things we found with people was that a lot of times people end up doing a livelihood that corresponds to those top strong domains, right? So if you're really great at being physical, you're like, I feel called to be a landscaper, right? If you're great at cognition, you're like, oh, I think I want to be a professor, or I think I want to, I love jobs that involve math, or maybe I'm interested in computer programming, something like that. So don't be surprised if you actually found a calling in your stronger domains. That actually happens to pretty much everyone we meet. There are times, obviously, where sometimes societally that's difficult to do. And so for me, cultivating strong, healthy domains gives us the ability to advocate for the livelihood that we're called to. I'll just give an example. There were times where women weren't allowed to be doctors, right? Or racism plays into things. So sometimes the system can be difficult, and we need a really strong inner strength to try to really fight for, hey, I have a seat at this table. I'm called to this work, right? So sometimes if we get all our domains healthy, they actually give us the power to then be able to advocate for the livelihood we want. And also, because these bottom two domains affect our whole life, if our domains are not at least at a competent level, your dream might be compromised by one of the struggling domains. So you want to bring that up. I'll give you an example. I knew a brilliant high school history teacher. She was the most popular teacher. All the students loved her, the parents loved her. She made history come alive. She was amazing. And yet she struggled with alcoholism. And she ended up getting caught drinking in between classes, and it became a huge issue. And so the school went through various things with it, and then finally they came to this idea that they had to fire her because of it. And parents and students showed up to advocate for her, to say, you can't fire her, she's a brilliant teacher. But she had had too many indiscretions that happened. And so, even though she was quite brilliant and this was what she was called to, she ended up losing this really precious opportunity because of another domain, right? And so, that just tells us that we want our domains to be as healthy as possible so that they support us advocating for this livelihood, but also not to lose the livelihood. And it takes all your domains to even do your livelihood, right? I mean, you can't do your job without some cognition, without relating to other people, without having to emotionally deal with the group you're working with or psychologically hold yourself. So the truth is, we need all our domains to even do that which we're called to, that passion that we have. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for those examples and stories. And yeah, I'll just add one thing that comes up is that um, when we do this domain check-in, as we mentioned, sometimes there are things that we can do, right? Like you said, releasing the fear and getting therapeutic support and all of that. But then other times we can identify systemic reasons why we're not doing well in these domains. And, for example, in your book, you talk about food deserts or pollution in low-income neighborhoods. And so, or even like if we're feeling not a whole lot of ability to connect with the spiritual or even to get exercise because we're having to work all the time, right? Like our system is really forcing us to work all the time to be able to meet our needs, right? Under this current economic system. So why I mention this is because our livelihoods can be a vehicle for systems change, right? So one thing I notice is you can do this check-in in the domains. You can sense into what are the domains that I can do some release around, right? Like I've got some ideas like I'm not smart enough, right? Like I've thought that my whole life, I'm just not smart enough, right? And then I can release that and work with that and cultivate that. But where there are systemic challenges, like, food deserts or labor conditions or something structural or systemic or oppression or discrimination in relation to your community and your identities, then perhaps that can be a direction for your livelihood, right? That your livelihood can actually be in service of alleviating that domain for yourself, for your community, and systemically, right? So that's why I love this Frederick Buechner quote, "We are called to the place where the world's deepest hunger meets our deepest gladness." And it really just points to oftentimes that which breaks our heart, those systemic or life challenges or systemic challenges that we feel into, they can actually be direction for our livelihoods, for our calling. So I just want to share that. And then the other piece that comes up is I think about our livelihoods as gardens, right? And we have plants in our gardens that we cultivate, another word, cultivate. And sometimes we can look at our garden and we can find that it's not in balance. It's not balanced, right? It's out of balance. And what I mean by that is I can at least sense it in mine and find, wow, all of my plants are very cognitive, right? I'm on Zoom all the time, or I'm very much in my head and I'm not really using my body. So I could also look at this domain piece and say, how might I plant my livelihood garden to include a plant that is, say, more embodied, right? And I'm including work or efforts that are non-monetized. So I might volunteer one day a week in my community to plant trees or, do ecosystem restoration work or even to pick up trash, right? Like that might be something. But yeah, just to think about our livelihood gardens, all the plants, all the ways that we contribute to this time, thinking about which domains they're really strengthened by and they're really supported by. And then if we do have a domain that we'd like to water or cultivate, maybe that can also point to a new direction in work that we're doing or even a new plant in our livelihood garden. So just want to add those examples. So you've talked about this idea of returning to our true selves or getting in touch with our deeper self and this kind of feeling that happens when we do touch into that integration of the domains. And you call it essence. And so I'd love for you to share with us what is essence. And I know you also invite us to have different words depending on what resonates, but what is essence in your understanding, and why is it related to this conversation about true success?
Thank you. So yeah, essence is a huge part of the work that we do with True Success for All. And essence is our deeper nature. It is that which lies behind or underneath all that conditioning, all the fear, all the doubts. You can kind of think of it as your core self, and then all the conditioning and the fears and the what ifs all kind of got piled up on top of it. I think a lot of times you hear this metaphor in the world, things like a diamond in the rough, right? And if you clear off the dirt and everything, oh, there's the diamond, right? So the diamond is actually one word for essence. And people have different words for it. Some people call it their heart or their soul. Some people call it the still small voice inside them, or their Buddha nature if they're Buddhist. Um, in the Aborigine culture, they have a word didiri, which means the one who listens, which is so beautiful. In Islam, there is a term true beingness, which I love. And in the Navajo Nation, they use the word spirit. They talk of their spirit. And so it has many different words, and it's in every culture. Every culture has some language around getting in touch with our essence, our soul, whatever that might be. Why it's important is that when we get in touch with this deeper nature, we are in touch with strength and calm, incredible depth of calm and equanimity, and also clarity. We have real clarity about when we look out on the world, we see things as they are, not as we fear them to be, but we see them with wisdom. You know, that's another word for it, is wisdom seeing, right? And having that calm and clarity and strength, that is what allows us to then express our true nature. And interestingly, Mark and I don't call essence our true nature, because often true nature, in some spiritual circles, they'll call essence your true nature. But we think of our true nature as being our essence plus our humanity. So it's not just to get into some spiritual place or something and deny your humanity, but it's the integration of who you express yourself as, fully embodied with your deeper nature. So I have the freedom to live my passions. I have the freedom to be authentic. I have the freedom to stand up for the social justice things that I care about. I have the freedom to be silly, and I have the freedom to wear whatever I want, you know? And so our humanity expresses often through those stronger domains, like physically, cognitively, emotionally, but it's our essence that gives us the base, the strength, the calm, and the clarity and the centeredness to be able to do this and not falter, not fall back because somebody says, well, you're not allowed to, or you don't get to, or you don't belong at the table. It's like, excuse me, you know, essence is like, oh, excuse me, I belong, you know? And so we love helping people reconnect to their essence so that they have the strength to be able to live right livelihood for themselves and to create a true, what they would call a truly successful, a meaningful and fulfilling life for me. Yeah.
Yes, and I do love that, you offer this essence idea and practice so that we can face the domains that we're, not as integrated or not doing as well in, that we can face those fears, with that strength and that courage. And it really helps us show up. And so since you are a meditation teacher, I want to invite us to close our conversation time with you guiding us in an invitation to tap into essence, because we can tap into it any moment of every day. So I want to invite that. So just to say, we're going to go into this meditation piece, and then after that we'll go into the Q&A. So feel free to get comfortable and I'm going to hand it over to you, Maureen, to guide us in connection with essence.
Oops. Can I unmute? Am I on mute? Okay, great. So go ahead and I just invite you to get comfortable and just take a moment to close your eyes or look softly at the floor in front of you. And the reason we do this is just so we're not visually stimulated into a lot of thinking. And so we're just kind of clearing the space, letting go a little bit. And just take a couple of breaths just to arrive right here in this moment. And I'd invite you to begin with just noticing what's present right now. So there may be some joy or ease, or you may notice some busyness or tension, or maybe some stress. And whatever's here, it's okay that it's here. We just don't need to hold on to it or cling to it. And so one practice would be to notice what's here, perhaps some stress or tension, and just imagine that you can gently breathe it out of your body on the out breath. So you notice some stress and you just gently breathe it out on the out breath. Or breathe out those busy thoughts. Or you might imagine the energy of that stress bubbling out of your body or rising off your body. It might leave as tingling, or you feel heat rising off your body, or perhaps some pressure releasing. And so busyness or stress is here, but you're just letting it also flow and go. And it's okay if the same stress is there again and again, perhaps a worry. There's always one more breath, so you can always gently breathe it out. And by doing this, you're just gently emptying the stress. If you're struggling with a lot of stress today or some kind of big tension, you might imagine that you're in a wide, open, big natural space, like sitting at a beach or sitting on a mountaintop or a meadow, someplace with big sky. And just give this tension more room to rise off, just rising off to that big sky, that big space. And notice what happens when you give it a little more space. Perhaps it softens a bit. or doesn't feel as intense. And now that you're letting yourself empty, it may not all be gone, so you can let that busyness be in the front side of your body, perhaps in your face or chest or torso, and just letting that busyness be in the front side. And then I invite you to just take a step back, gently into the background, and notice if there's some quiet or some spaciousness that you notice. And if so, I invite you to begin just breathing into that quiet. Or you might notice a warm spot inside. And you could just begin breathing into that warmth, just letting it get as big as it wants. No need to grow it. You're just allowing it just to come into focus. And if you like, you can also allow yourself to become this quiet. We do this by letting go of the stories, letting go of the body for a moment, and just let the quiet be your body. So it's as if the quiet is breathing, peace is breathing. Quiet is breathing, and you're just letting everything else go. All that extra energy can just bubble off, and you're just resting here, resting in this calm essence, this deeper part of you, and all the extra is allowed to bubble away. So that just gives you a taste of how one can learn to step back from all the busyness of our conditioning, our worries, and find this inner refuge where we can touch in and get in touch with our essence. And when we do that and really embody this part of ourself, we then can move forward in the world in a way that feels calm, relaxed, centered, and can help us move our passion forward in the world. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maureen. Beautiful to just sit in essence with you and with everyone on the call. Thank you. Thank you for that gift. So we want to open it up now for any comments or questions from folks who are listening and with us. Thank you for your listening and for being here. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, either for Maureen or anything that I mentioned, you can come off mute and share them now. If you raise your hand, we'll call on you. Or you could put them in the chat. So if folks would like to speak, the best is to go to reactions on the bottom of your screen. It has a little heart or sometimes a different symbol, and then there's a raise hand function. So you can raise your hand there, or again, you can put in the chat, I'd like to speak, or you can put, your question in the chat. But yeah, we'd love to hear what resonated, what's standing out to you, any insights, any questions, any reflections. Sylvia, maybe we'll begin with you.
There is a question actually.
Oh,
Can you
wonderful.
expand on the more idea of monotasking? I think that's for
Yes,
you, Della.
yes. Can I expand more on the idea of monotasking? Well, I will share two resources related to this. One of them is a book by Oliver Burkeman called 4,000 Weeks, which is a really great book on, what's really important. And it's actually from that book that I got this idea of monotasking. But this idea that we really, somebody wrote it in the chat, but when we try to multitask, we don't actually multitask. We just switch our attention kind of quickly between things. And I don't want to say it's everyone's experience, but certainly my own. I don't do any of the things particularly well. Yeah, because my attention is fragmented and divided. And so monotasking is really just a attentiveness to one task, right? Mono one task. So to again, focus on the making of a meal or eating a meal or going on a walk or a conversation with a friend. And for me, the experience can be quite delicious. The unlearning or the unhooking is sometimes for me, can feel boring because I am so used to having so many stimulation, like listening to a podcast while making dinner and talking to a friend, like just so many things. And so really paring that down can be hard at first, but then I can find such richness within it. And within the mindfulness tradition, engaged Buddhism, which Maureen and I both are coming from, there are many practices of mindful walking or mindful dishwashing or mindful eating. So yeah, it's a beautiful practice to bring our full attention to one task. So the two resources, one is 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, and the other one is Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, which is an excellent book by a journalist about how our attention is, what's for sale, basically, and how we can kind of reclaim our attention. So that's another really good book. So I'll put those two in the chat. But yeah, thank you for asking that. All right,
There's
we have another,
another, yeah,
yeah, I see
go
that.
ahead, the
Another
other question.
question. Um, can we lower the threshold of enoughness? Um, that's a beautiful question. Do you have thoughts on that, Maureen? And then I'll share.
Yeah, I think for myself, or in the practices that I've done and seen in other people, when we get in touch with our essential nature and we start embodying, getting in touch with ourselves more deeply, what we find is that there's a lot of satisfaction already here. There's a lot of contentment already here. And in those moments, the pull to feel like enoughness is about a lot starts to diminish. And suddenly I'm having enough being with my walk today. I'm having enough with this cup of tea. Della talked about being mindful with a cup of tea or washing the dishes. This enoughness gets more connected to our embodiment and our aliveness rather than buying something to try to, have some adrenaline for a moment. So I think that lowers the more embodied and alive we are in our own life. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add, why I became a renegade economist. That's the title of my livelihood guarded, Renegade Economist, was because I was getting interested in Buddhism, so mindfulness and mindfulness spirituality, but I was also asking this question around going upstream and finding out there was something wrong with our economic system. So when I kind of put those together, I was like, oh my gosh, is there a Buddhist economics? And there's a whole tradition of Buddhist economics. And one person who's connected with the idea of Buddhist economics is E.F. Schumacher, right? In 1970s, traditional development economist who went to Burma with his classic development economics ideas of increasing GDP. And it was there when he was faced with a culture and an ideology of Buddhism that he realized the people there didn't want more and more. They were actually trying to work towards a happiness with less and less. So he has a book, a very famous book called Small is Beautiful, Economics as if People Mattered. And in there, there's a chapter on Buddhist economics. And so just to say that I think this enoughness question is a really good one, particularly as we are impacting the limits of the ecological systems that we're in. So, what does it mean or feel like to live a simple life? And Satish Kumar has a beautiful book on elegant simplicity, and he's actually someone who taught me. He's the founder of Schumacher College. He was a good friend of E.F. Schumacher. When he would go in the lunch line, he'd always take a little bit less than he wanted, right? And he really taught the ethics of simplicity and humility that are just really beautiful practices. So, great question. How do we lower the threshold of enoughness? I think even just knowing that there is enoughness is a really useful thing. Practicing gratitude is a really useful thing with enoughness. And then, yeah, finding joy in, what is not harmful for people on the planet and, finding happiness or contentment resting into essence, right, can also help with this as well. But beautiful
Yeah, I would
question. Go ahead.
also, yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking, also connectivity. When we're connected with community, there's a lot of nourishment there. Think about hanging out with your friends or hanging out with your neighborhood. And when we're connected, we're full. We're also full. So I think that also helps as well. Yeah.
So, Maureen, we have another question. Do you know how Indigenous peoples practice meditation actively or passively besides naturally spending time in nature?
Yeah, so I would first of all say I'm not an expert on this at all. And I'm a white person too, so I can't speak for Native Americans in general. I mean, what I'm familiar with is my husband actually works as a psychiatrist for three Native American tribes where we live. And what I have seen in terms of those tribes is that they also include things like sweat lodges, ceremonies with their medicine men. So it goes beyond just being in nature. They actually have rituals that are performed regularly in the tribes that attend to their spirituality and also their mental health, their physical health, their cleansing. So, yeah.
And then I'll add there is a beautiful body of work, the work that reconnects with, I know many people here are connected with, and there's practices and activities, and they come from many different traditions, but Indigenous traditions is one of the threads that weaves into the work that reconnects, and they're all open source. So, for example, there's a practice of seven generation thinking, which comes from Indigenous tradition to in this practice, you meet someone of the seventh generation from now and you contemplate how that might impact the decisions we make today, how to be a good ancestor. So the work that reconnects is something I would definitely turn you to, but excellent question. Maureen, someone's asking if you can share more prompts or starting points for cultivating our number seven, our integrative. And I agree that does feel like maybe the least obvious as to how
Yeah,
to integrate that. So what would you say
yeah,
about that?
that's great. Well, the first thing I would say is if your other six domains if something's struggling significantly in the other six domains, your integration will not be as healthy, right? So that's one piece of it. So you want if you're going to work on the integrative domains, you want to make sure that you don't have a domain that's dragging you back, because otherwise your integration's not going to work as well. But in terms of integration, it's kind of like what I pointed to earlier, which is it might be a gratitude practice where if you're doing a task, let's say, or you come home from work, to really take a moment to notice, let's say making dinner, to take a moment of gratitude and notice and name how each of the 7 domains actually played out in that task. And so that's a way to become aware of it. Like you think, like it starts to beg some bigger questions. Like you might go, how does my spiritual domain impact making my dinner? And it might impact you because you're vegetarian and you don't believe in killing other beings, right? And you're like, I didn't really think about how my spiritual domain is actually playing in this. So that's one of the greatest ways I find to start being aware of the integrative domain, is to just have a practice of gratitude of how all 7 domains helped you do a swim, helped you drive your car, helped you parent today, helped you do your schoolwork, because you'll start to feel into how some of these more subtle domains are actually influencing your day-to-day, moment-to-moment living, and you didn't even know that you were functioning off all 7 in that moment. Yeah.
Another thing that I might add for the integrative, I wonder if we feel that integration when we go into flow, when we step
Oh
into
yeah,
flow.
totally.
Because
Yes.
I do find that my day is very segmented. Like I'll have like an hour to do this, and like you'll have like an hour of exercise or an hour of, phone with a friend, or eating, or like a video call, right? And so it for me, I can feel very like fragmented,
Mhm,
and yet when I'm in flow, I
mhm,
don't feel that fragmentation. You just, it's like this feeling of stepping into flow, and I imagine it's the accessing of all of the domains. And
mhm.
I mean, of course it depends on what you're in flow with, but one thing I've learned about being in flow is that it's one uninterrupted time. So you have like spaciousness within time. You get to really dive into whatever it is that you're in flow in. Two, that it's something you care about, right? It's something meaningful to you. And then three, it's the right level of challenge, right? If it's not challenging at all, you don't necessarily step into flow, or if it's too challenging, it can be overwhelming. So when you get those three things and you really cultivate the time and space to be in flow, I think there's a feeling of integration and certainly essence that can come through.
Yeah, I was going to say that sometimes you can just play with, how would essence dance? How would essence cook? How would essence drive? How would essence walk through this forest? And all of a sudden, there's an aliveness that happens as all the domains come online, and you're really fully present and fully alive in the moment. It's beautiful. Yeah, thanks. That's beautiful, Della.
So I want to invite more questions. So again, you can raise your hand if you'd like to come off mute and ask them, or you can put them in the chat. Maureen, we do have another question around meditation. So someone says, thank you for the guided meditation. I'd love to hear some more recommendations for books or other resources about meditations.
Ooh, well, I think there's so many different practices. So the first thing I would say is that if you're playing with meditation, to play with different kinds of mindfulness and meditation. For instance, just even in Buddhism, there's the 3 larger schools are insight meditation, where you can access those through places like Spirit Rock or IMS in the United States. There's Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhism, and that is beautiful in its own way. And then there's Zen Buddhism. So, playing with and feeling into some of that can be helpful. One of the people who I love, who I think does beautiful pointing with meditation, is Locke Kelly. And he has a book where, rather than using concentration in meditation, you're actually stepping back. It's more like this essence practice. I love this practice with essence where, yes, you could concentrate on a flame or on your breath or those kinds of things, but most people often feel, I can't do that because there's so much busyness. So I love this practice of being able to release and let go and just breathing out. It's okay that the busyness is here. I'm just not holding on to it. It arises, I let it go. And then emptying into that emptiness. So I think Locke Kelly does a lot of beautiful work around that as well. Um, so yeah, there's so many, right? I would just ask you, even I have a friend who goes on YouTube and just checks out meditations of different teachers on YouTube and then comes up with like, these are my 5 favorite kinds of teachers, right? So you can do that as well. Just do a meditation on YouTube and, yoga version or concentration version, breath version. And on Art's site, we'll be putting up in the next couple of days, we'll be putting the meditation I did today, I'll be putting up on the site as well. So
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just add my morning practice because I actually found myself pretty strong in the spiritual realm and felt grateful for that, for all the teachers and lessons. So I start with 5 minutes of the Vipassana practice of that focus on breath that you described. So really helping to ground and kind of concentration and mindfulness. And then for 5 minutes, I expand and I do more of an like a more insight practice where, whether it's resting in the open sky or in a bigger sense of consciousness. And I really invite myself to rest in presence and radiate love. That's what I invite, and I really kind of rest into that. And then I do a meta meditation practice. So wishing myself well, wishing others well. May I be free of greed, hatred, and delusion. May I turn towards enoughness and love, serve, remember, right? And so just to say there's so many beautiful types of meditations and to play with them and to have like a toolkit so that you can draw from what feels helpful in a day, like a concentration practice or a self-compassion practice or something else. So yeah, thank you for those. So we have a
I
question.
want, yeah, I want
Oh
to
yes,
speak to
go
that
ahead,
question
Sylvia.
if you're okay with that, because it touches my soul really. And thank you for posting. First, I want to acknowledge that is a very important question. It's a question about privilege. Let's say, let's name it. And yes, the meditation and all these healing of ourselves and talking about our different dimensions is in a way very privileged. And the question is how that helps with the healing of the world, the climate crisis, and all the things that are happening around the world. I'm not reading the question, but it's what is mentioned in there. And one thing that I want to share is that if we all have different realities, we all have different contexts, but if we don't do anything to help our own strength, our individual strength, we wouldn't be able to do absolutely anything from any one of our positions, whether we are in privilege or we are suffering and being oppressed in the more oppressed spectrum. So meditation and healing ourselves is actually important, even inside the worst of the situations that we are. And I'm talking not as a facilitator. I am a co-facilitator with Della in the course that we were talking about, but I'm talking as a person who has been and still carries being a refugee and an immigrant and having worked with immigrants and refugees for a lot of my life. So thank you for that question. It's a very important question. We shouldn't take this as, oh, I heal myself, and the world is gonna be okay. No, I heal myself because healing myself is how I can help others. Is sort of, put your mask first, in the airplane. If you don't take care of yourself, there's no way that you can help others. And you shouldn't be doing one or the other, or one first and the other second. You should be doing both at the same time. So thank you for that question. And thank you, Maureen. I don't know if
And
you want to add something.
well, I just want to uplift the question because we haven't heard it yet. So I just want to make sure folks hear it. So, how does this new or ancient economics for community and this new or ancient psychology for self help the global north and the global south deal with the very real and urgent seeming impasse between them about funding climate mitigation? which might be an impasse that is never quickly solved enough to prevent an increase in mass hunger, wildfires, flood, debt, poverty, inequality, conflict, sanctions, and overall non-holisticness. Do we think our ideas are holistic, and will they or will they not quickly enough assist where they are needed? So that's kind of the question to bring in. Maureen, anything else you'd like to add? Thank you, Sylvia.
Yeah, I thank you so much. I really appreciate this. This is why we call our program True Success for All, right? Because it is global that way. It is holistic that way. And so for me, I think Sylvia just spoke to it beautifully. This in no way do I believe that we're meant to like just heal ourselves and it'll be a happy world. That is not my passion. I was really clear that when we do this work, we release our fears, our outdated beliefs, and we come into the strength of our essence. One, we have the capacity to be able to deal with incredible pain and difficulty and chaos in the world. It makes us that stable person going forward in that work. It also helps us deal with our community. I'm reminded of a story that Thich Nhat Hanh told about the Vietnamese refugees in the boats during the Vietnam War. And he said that they were looking for what helped some boats make it because other boats were not making it. And they wanted to know what was it. And they were asking, how much food did you bring? What kind of boat did you do? They were asking the refugees that made it. And the refugees that made it all had a consistent theme. They said that in their boat, they had one person who held their seat. And it could have been an old woman, it could have been an old man, it could have been a mother, it could have been anybody. But there was one person who held their seat. And when everything was chaotic and falling apart, that one person would say, look at me, everyone stop, sit down, row, we're going to make it. Just let's come together. And they could see another boat, 50 yards away, chaos erupting, people standing up in the boat, screaming, and then the boat would capsize. And every boat that made it said there was somebody who just helped us hold on while we were going through that. And so when we are in touch with our essence, not only do we have the power to calm ourselves and make our life go in personal and social directions that are good for us, but that passion may be to help the world or social justice. One of the things I'm really clear about, just for True Success for All, is that I want to bring these practices to the people that are creating our systems. Because if they're in fear and they are in doubt and they are in competition, then they're not going to make the choices that help our systems get healthy. And so True Success has a whole stream of where we are committed to going upstream to even work with the people who are in corporations, who are in government, who are in politics, and also to work with advocates and those who are, standing up to those systems. Because if you're standing up to those systems just from anger or hurt or fright, you burn out after a while. And if you can release your fear and tension, come back to your essence every day, you have that strength to keep going forward. So I'm very clear about living in America, particularly right now. I'm very clear in the United States about how things are about to change in a really, upheaval for the whole world. And so to me, I could not be working for True Success for All at a more opportune time than right now. And really empowering people to do this work and really helping their psychology change. If I could just add one thing, my husband Mark and I like to talk about the idea that 300 years ago, we had a cognitive evolution. 300 years ago, people turned to the church and said, we're done with superstition and fear. We want scientific method. We want facts. And we had the Age of Enlightenment. And out of that evolution, we now have the technology that we have, which is amazing and beautiful. The problem is we didn't bring our psychology along with it. And so we have this incredible technology, but it's being wielded by a lot of human beings who, sometimes we say they're like 4-year-olds. right? And it's like, you don't give a gun to a 4-year-old. And so for us at True Success for All, it's all about this movement to have a psychological evolution, to bring our psychology up, to release our trauma and our fears and our resentments and get grounded so that actually the systems, economic systems, technological systems, they're being run with the awareness of somebody who's a mature adult, who's a caring, compassionate, connected adult. So sorry, I get a little fiery there, but that's when I get on my soapbox and it's like, like I love the world. I want it to be a healthier place. Yeah.
Thank you, Maureen. And I'll just add in the chat a book that really deals with this topic, a book by Ron Purser, Mick Mindfulness, How Mindfulness Became the New Capitalist Spirituality. It's a delicious book about what happens when we take mindfulness away from engaged Buddhism or the rest of the Eightfold Noble Path. And I think what Thich Nhat Hanh, what Maureen, what myself, the lineage that we're coming from is, really a holistic sense of Buddhism and really spiritual activism or engaged Buddhism. So, for example, right livelihood is taking our spirituality off the cushion into our lives. And to have right livelihood, we actually couldn't have work that contributes to harm or suffering. And in fact, right livelihood is a path where you're contributing to the alleviation of suffering and the flourishing of people and the planet. So in reintegrating the Eightfold Noble Path and reconnecting mindfulness with a more engaged spiritual or spiritual activist path is also part of this. We have one more comment and then we'll close. So Lugano wanted to share something. So Lugano, just wanted to invite you and then we'll close.
Thank you so much, Della. Good. Thank you for the gift of your presence and everyone else and the knowledge. And I want to thank Maureen for giving me an experience in my body through the guidance. And I tell you, I feel from the time you guided us into meditation until now, it's almost some different person. I just, it's a relief and a healing. So that's my personal experience. And I thank also Sylvia for reminding us it's so important. We are at our best and we give others the best and we contribute better when we take care of ourselves. And these are so important through not only this experience, but I did some pendulum breathing before. And every time I would do that and do stress exercises, and I'm meeting someone or attend a class, I was at my, my best. So in a way, so I encourage what we are doing. And I thank everyone who is contributing. It's good to see Sarah too.
Thank you so much, Lugana. What a beautiful way to close, to end. So we're going to close with Maureen for final invitations going forth, and then I'll close as well. But thank you, Lugana. That was beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, that was really beautiful to hear. And as you were speaking, it actually brought up another thought to me. And that is one of the beautiful pieces of doing this essence work where we are able to step back and release our trauma and our pain or step back into our essence that I've heard from hundreds of people, thousands of people at this point, is that when people are in touch with essence, they get in touch with the part of themselves before the trauma. And so people will say, oh my goodness, I realized in this deeper nature, I am not broken. I realize in this deeper nature, I am not struggling. I'm not struggling with ideas that there's something wrong with me, or even with illness. People can have illness and step back and say, oh, I can have refuge with some part of me that is not overwhelmed by illness. So it's so beautiful to get in touch with that again and to redefine who we are instead of what happened to us. No, this is my deeper nature. this is who I truly am at the deeper level. So that's beautiful. So thank you. In terms of like, if we want to experience true success for ourselves, I love how you said, Della, pick something and jump into it and then reevaluate how it goes. If you jump into something, you say, okay, I want to try to be free, so I'm going to go dance today, with my friends. And then you find you're contracting, and it's like, I wanted to dance. What is that? That's the work we're pointing to in True Success. Find the contraction as you go forward, any contraction that's there, and then find that fear, find that belief that's holding you back, and do some practices to release it. Do some practices where you're releasing the fear out of your body as energy every day. I do release practice every day. At the end of my workday, I just lay on the floor and I let all the stress just shake out of my body. And I find I'm much less tired if I do that for about 10 or 15 minutes, sometimes 20. And then having a regular practice where you step back and find this part of yourself, your essence, your spirit, your heart, whatever you call it. And then with that, go ahead and develop the domains. You're going to have to commit to some development. You might have to study, read a book, go back to school, whatever it might. It's worth the work because your passion and your heart are being called forward, and we need you. We need you fully alive. We need you skilled. We need you doing your heart's calling, because that's how we come into balance again. And if you're a therapist, I just want to put out the word, if you're a therapist who is interested in this release work as a therapist with people, I actually have a new training that's going to be starting in Boston on January 11th. It's a 6-month training, 6 weekends, and it's a beautiful place to come together in person and learn this release work and learn how to teach people how to come back into essence so that you can go out and empower your community. So we'd love for you guys to join us in Boston on January 11th. You can find that information on our website, truesuccessforall.com.
Thank you,
And thank you,
Maureen.
Della. I want to say a big thank you to you.
Of course, thank you to you. And yeah, so beautiful invitations going forth. And I'll just add, if anyone did feel that this was helpful, useful, or a gift for them today, to invite you to give a gift in terms of a donation. So just to donate, you would go to the link to register again and make a donation. And thank you for that. Helps us continue doing this work. Also want to invite folks to join us for the Cultivating Regenerative Livelihood course, myself and Sylvia. It's going to be next year, and it starts in January and goes through April. And it's all about cultivating regenerative livelihoods. So we'd love to have you be a part of it. And we have that coupon discount code in the chat as well. And then, yeah, definitely inviting us to check out Maureen's book. I really enjoyed listening to it because it's Maureen's voice reading it, which I loved. But it also is a great thing to read, and it goes through all of those domains as well as what is essence and many, many stories and examples. So just encouraging folks to do that. And you can find the book at truesuccessforall.com as well. So yeah, I'll just close with inviting us to return to that idea of we are attentive to what we measure. We are attentive to what we measure. So may we go forth today with new metrics of success, right? Thinking about what success is, what is a good day, what is a good life, and may the benefits from today, this conversation, our time together, our resting in essence, ripple out into the web of life. So thank you all so much for your attention, your listening, our time today. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, Gaia Education. And thank you all. Be well.
Thank you.